This article came out from the Associated Press, which is pretty much the people who give all the newspapers their stories for the day. And you might remember that there was a task force formed by the governor of Florida during the outrage by the people that were upset with the shooting. They wanted the law changed or completely done away with. They don't like the idea that people are allowed to protect their lives in case people are attacking them. Mostly they're people that don't like guns, and they believe that if there were less guns, people wouldn't be killing each other. I guess, once the guns are gone, they would go after knives and baseball bats and hammers and all that other stuff. But I found this article, and it talks about the task force and what they found and where they're headed with this case, whether they think the laws should be changed so that people can't just walk away. But according to this article, apparently key legislative leaders said they would not favor changes if they were recommended. So even if the board recommended them, the legislators are saying no way. Remember, Florida is, for the most part, a Republican state. Florida's been leading the nation in liberalizing gun laws, and I believe that was why this test case was brought up here, and this is why it became a national case with the media and with the national race baiters, including Obama. I personally think it was a mistake for the governor to create this task force. But since he's created it, and since we're looking at it, I think the most important thing to consider right now is how the prosecution overstepped its powers and how we can control an out of control prosecutor in the future. This case has completely gone down the tubes as far as what the law was intending. The whole point of the law was so that people like George wouldn't even have to go to jail. He wouldn't even get one night in jail, and that was the plan. That's why we created the law. But she ignored the law, so there has to be some sort of teeth in the law for both sides. I mean, we have teeth in the law to make sure that people like you and me don't break it, because if we do, we go to prison. But what happens when the prosecutor breaks the law? Nothing? Well, that can't be right. At the very minimum, she should lose her job. I mean, even in communist countries and countries where they allow corruption in their government, this lady would have been definitely removed from office. So the article says that Weatherford, who is the guy selected by the GOP caucus in the House to review he would review the recommendations, but he said, what we won't do is use that tragedy as an excuse to water down people's ability to defend themselves in Florida. And he should have said that tragedy or any tragedy. The fact that people misuse guns or the fact that people get hurt by guns would never be a reason to take away people's rights. That would be like saying, there's just so many drunk drivers, we're just going to have to take away cars. Unfortunately, we're sorry. We know you like your car and you like to be able to drive to work and everything, but, it's just been such a problem and so many people are being killed every day. So the task force apparently reiterated its first recommendation, which affirmed stand your ground. The task force concurs with the core belief that all persons, regardless of citizen status, have a right to feel safe and secure in our state. To that end, all persons have the right to stand their ground and defend themselves from attack with proportionate force in every place they have a lawful right to be, conducting themselves in a lawful manner. And I'm glad that they included the part about the citizenship status, because that's something that has always bothered me, and I've always thought that if you are a human being, you have a right to bear arms for the purpose of self-defense and what other purpose the Constitution provides. So to get a carry permit, it certainly shouldn't require that you're a legal American citizen or a legal citizen of some sort. And as I've said before, I don't think that you should need a permit to carry a gun. It's my right to carry a gun, and for that right to be denied, it would be on the government's back to find out whether I'm allowed to carry a gun or not. I shouldn't have to go around proving to people that I have that right. It's an understood right. Some of the law enforcement were confused about the law and whether they were allowed to arrest somebody or hold somebody during an investigation, because the law says no arrest. And in a case where it's obvious that the person was acting in self-defense, there would be absolutely no arrest, and that's the way the law stands. If there is some confusion on whether it was a self-defense shooting or killing, then definitely the police have some latitude in that. But in this case, the evidence was so overwhelming that it was a self-defense case, so obvious that the police completely refused to arrest him, not because there was some sort of ambiguity in the law, but because that's the way they felt. They said, no, this is not a murder. This is a man who stood his ground. And even if there was no stand your ground law, the old law would have sufficed, because the old law said if you can't get away, then you have the right to defend yourself. That means if you're on your back and somebody's got you pinned to the ground, then you're allowed to use your gun to protect yourself. So the fact that they were trying to mess with the stand your ground law, the new law, with a case that had really nothing to do with it, it was very ridiculous in my eyes. But I like the new law because it gave that person the protection of not having to go through the court system, because once you can see that it's obviously a case of self-defense, then he shouldn't be arrested. Every penny that he spent towards his defense should be reimbursed to him. And the prosecutor that lied in the affidavit should definitely be held responsible for every penny that cost came from his pockets, whether that money was given to him from supporters or that he earned it. It makes no difference. And it says here other task force members were concerned that self-defense shooters might have to pay for legal representation. That's how we all feel. That's why we made the law. We don't want them to have to pay. We don't want them to lose days of work. We don't want their lives to be interrupted because somebody attacked them and they had to defend their life. And as this one guy said, every law-abiding citizen shouldn't have to lawyer up. Had George had a lawyer from the very beginning, none of this would be happening. There would be no case right now, because he wouldn't have made any statements to the police or done anything that gave them any ammunition against him, because all of the evidence, all of the witnesses are on his side. The only reason there's any question at all is because he got confused with the timeline and what was going on, because of so much going on in such a short period. And whenever you have a situation where you're in an emergency, time stands still or it goes very quickly. So for somebody to give a proper timeline while they're going through an emergency is almost impossible. Earlier in the week, the panel heard from several Panhandle residents who said they support the Stand Your Ground law and they don't want to see it weakened. The law shouldn't be repealed because of one racially charged and media-hyped incident, said one of the residents, and that's exactly my feeling. It's racially charged and media-hyped. He said it very well. And then, of course, they say that someone else thinks that the Stand Your Ground laws around the nation are dangerous, because somebody who chooses to defend themselves is given greater protection under the law than a law enforcement officer, as if there's something wrong with that. Law enforcement officers are trained for certain things, and in the case where a law enforcement officer is defending his life, and let's say for example, he's on the ground and he's being pounded into the ground, and he finally has to draw his weapon and shoot somebody, believe me, he's afforded the same Stand Your Ground protections. It's just that they do a few different things, like they'll hold him in a different position and not let him go on the streets again for a couple weeks or whatever time frame that they choose. Kind of a desk job. And for people like George, he can immediately have his gun back. And the fact that they took his gun is a sign that somebody broke the law. They took his gun, they took his freedom, and they have no evidence, and they lied on the affidavit. There's, just take a look at some of my videos, the affidavit video. It's obviously full of lies. They coached the witnesses. Dee Dee was definitely coached. And it's their job to get to the truth and not to convict a person. Maybe that's another thing that should come out of this case, is forcing the prosecution to get to the truth no matter where it leads. And if they find information along the prosecution's path, even if it's in the middle of the trial or even close to the end, and they find evidence that supports the person that's on trial, they should be forced at that time to bring that information out immediately and to make it known and not try to argue it or try to make it less than it really is. I mean, what they did with George's pictures and how he was banged up, but the public didn't know about that. All that time that we had the prosecution and Crump and all the other people talking about George as if he had never had an injury. George couldn't go on TV and say, "That's not true, look, there's pictures." And they said, since there was no pictures of the injuries, then they didn't exist. Then when the pictures did come out, they said, "Oh, those little tiny scratches, that's nothing. He probably bumped his head on a sign or something." No, he didn't have any blood on him. Not at all. Just a little tiny ding on him. Did George have any injuries to his fist, like maybe he was punching somebody? No, but Trayvon did. Not a single mark. You would think if there was a fight and George was attacking Trayvon, he would have hit him at least once. But nothing. Not a single injury on George's hands from a punch mark. No broken knuckles and nothing. And you can see the broken nose. People tell me, "Oh, no, it's not broken." Well, it is, and you can tell. If you look at the area at the bridge of his nose, that's where the bone is. That's where he got hit the hardest, where it broke the skin, because all the rest is all soft tissue and cartilage. And you can see the marks on his head, all around his head. There's also abrasions on the side of his head, like he was on the concrete. And then you have to wonder, is this Trayvon's phone, or, I mean, whose phone is that? A little heart on it. I guess a guy might put a heart on his phone, but it just doesn't seem like something you would see on a guy's phone. And there's a can of the watermelon juice. Some people seem to think it's iced tea, but you can see the WA, Arizona watermelon juice. Anyhow, I just wanted to point this article out. I thought it was interesting. Good talking to you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.